welcome back to another video. My name is Adam, and in this video I'm gonna go through all my settings. I've had quite a few people email me and message me and say, what should I have my slider on, what sort of things should I have in my config, and a lot of questions about performance. So I'm just going to quickly go through all my options, and these options are current as of the 10th of October. So a little disclaimer first: the videos that you guys watch on YouTube, I've made some of them a month ago. My settings were different then. It was very stuttery. I've smoothed all that out now. It's all fine. And these settings that I'll show you now will, that's the reason why I get smooth performance now. So it's still going to perhaps be a bit stuttery for a few more videos, but they do get better. And there's a big change coming up that you'll see in about 10 videos time. A big change, which you'll already know about by the time it comes out, because I'll tell you about it here. So I'm going to go through each of my options now. I'm not going to be going through my P3D config file. I feel that is more specific to my machine and my add-ons, and that if anybody was to use that, it might mess up your sim because it's specific to my hardware and software. If you had the exact same hardware and software as me, then yes, it would be advantageous for you to copy certain elements that perhaps aren't in yours. But I just feel that your P3D config file is specific to your hardware and software setup. Saying that, let's go through the options. So we're going to go through these 4 tabs here, and then these 3 ones at the bottom. We'll do scenery last. Okay, so first up is the weather. I only use Active Sky and Rex Force 3D. Okay, I've swapped out the textures of the cloud art with the Invent-Tex sky colors. Or no, I've swapped out the sky colors for Active Sky, sorry, with the Invent-Tex colors. I do have cloud art attached as well. Anyway, I use Active Sky. I've never used any of these, so I don't know what they're like. I think some of these are actually Orbexes that they give you with when you get their program. I'm not sure. I've never used it. I always use Active Sky, and I always use the live weather with Active Sky. I've never even gone to user defined and had a play about in there, so I couldn't tell you what's really in there because I've never opened it. So yeah, I guess you can really modify things here, like you can do an X-plane. I think this is a real specific sort of, yeah. So I've never done that. It's always been on user weather themes, and I've always clicked Active Sky. Next thing is the vehicle and location. I've kept, these are the default options that you get with P3D. I've kept them as is. I remember reading the P3D manual when I got the first P3D aircraft, which was the 747, I believe. And it said to have your default loaded. And when I say loaded, I mean not in the sim on a gate, but have it on as your default aircraft to go to in this screen, and then load up your P3D machine. Now I don't know if or aircraft. I don't know if that's the same now as it was back then in version. This is version 4.3 now, so I'm not sure if it is the same, but I don't want to mess with it. So I've left the default aircraft, the default airports there. Don't want to rock the boat. It's no hardship to just go in and change these 2 options. Okay, so if you've got your favorite aircraft loaded there with your favorite airport loaded there, it may be the reason why you're getting a bit of a performance hit. Who knows? Time and season, it's always current. So right now this is the time and the date that I'm recording this. So add-ons, next thing. The only time I'll actually play with this is if I'm doing a video or I'm doing a flight rather at night time, and I haven't flown at night a lot, so I like to fly in the daytime still. So if it is nighttime, I'll change that to day just so I can see what's going on. Add-ons next. Okay, so people will say untick what you don't use, right? And I used to untick things, but I used to find that I'd forget to retick it, and then when I go into my sim and go, oh hang on, well, how come this isn't showing up? It's because I'd forgotten to retick it. And plus, you have to restart your sim. Like, once you untick or retick and you click OK, you have to then come out of P3D and load it all over again for it to take effect. And it's like, you know what? That's just too much hassle. I might as well just leave all these ticked, right? And then, yes, you get an extension in your loading time, okay? It doesn't take away from your performance, though, in your sim whatsoever. I've done tests, and it's exactly the same with all of these unticked and all of these ticked. The performance is the same. The only difference is it takes longer to load into your sim, which is fine. I go make a cup of tea, I go make a drink, I don't mind. So I leave all of them ticked. So that's that. Options. Okay, so there's a lot to go through here. One thing I've found really handy, especially if you're using other screens, is to have this unticked, pause on task switch. So if I go off to my other screen here, so I'm onto my other screen now, and I click on something, and as you can see, everything changes on this screen, it'll pause the sim. And I'm like, oh, I didn't want to do that, you know. So untick that, and that'll prevent that from happening. But one thing you will find is when you click off the sim, the sound will go, which is okay. That's fine. At least I know then that my mouse is on another screen and not in the sim. All these others I've left as default. So, whatever it is whatever it is. Here I've kind of left all this default. I mean, this makes no difference really. If you don't want to see the red labels above the aircraft flying for the AI traffic, then untick that. Okay, I've left it ticked just because at the moment I don't know the difference between like an A330 and A300. Boeing 737 and like an A310. It's like I'm still learning the difference. So I'd rather see stuff like that. I know it's not realistic, but for the moment I'm leaving it in. I will untick it eventually. I mean, these, it's your personal preference. This has no effect on anything really. So it's personal preference for all of these, but these are the ones I've ticked. I haven't really changed them, to be honest. Sound wise, yeah, voice playback speakers, that shouldn't, oh yes it is, yeah. So yeah, self-explanatory really. I used to have these ramped up to 100, but then I found it was too loud when I made videos, so I've put them all down to 50. Traffic wise, now I use traffic, oh god, I've got it up to 100. I use Traffic Global, an add-on that's in early access at the moment, but is promised to be full finished off by the end of the year. I haven't really changed these settings from when I was using my older AI traffic, which, to be honest, the models looked worse, but the performance I found was a little better. I haven't really changed these settings. In fact, I had this setting turned down to like 50, I think it was. It's turned up to 100, I think, because mainly I was doing some plane spotting at an airport, and I wanted to see all the traffic. Probably if I was going to Heathrow and I had a PMGG aircraft, I'd probably turn this down to like 45 to 50. Leave it on 100 for a moment. Like leisure boats, like I don't care about seeing leisure boats in the sim. Like speedboats, yachts, like I ain't that bothered. What I want to see are the big boats, the nice ones. So ships and ferries, I don't want to see them at every port. It doesn't really bother me if whatever, but these two do take a bit of hit on your performance. So like I can live with 5% and 0% for leisure boats. That's fine. Same with road vehicles. The more road vehicles you have, okay, the bigger the performance hit for your sim. So 10% roads, that's fine. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're flying at 35,000 feet or 40,000 feet, you ain't gonna see a car on the highway, okay? It's only if you're flying in low. And to be honest, when you're flying in low, you're really concentrating on your landing rather than going, oh hello, that's a nice array of cars out there. So 10% cars is adequate for a sim, I feel. And I get great performance for having 10% cars. Airport vehicle density. So yeah, it would be nice to have it all maxed out, okay? And then suddenly you've got hundreds of cars zooming around your runways, and you know there's like every vehicle, and it's like Piccadilly Circus out there. So it's like, yeah, I just have that set to normal or minimum, because again, airport vehicle density, like seeing things, you know, traveling around the airport for me is realistic, but it isn't the reason why I'm in the sim. You know, it's the airplane. That's the reason I'm in the sim. So I'm not that bothered really, and I think it does affect frame rates. Now, I'm not sure. I haven't done tests, because I do know some add-ons require certain sliders to be maxed out before you'll see everything that they offer. I don't know if GSX, I have that installed. I don't know. I can't remember what their manual said for this slider, what it has to be set at. But it's highly recommended that if an add-on recommends or says that you need to have this slider set to here in order for their add-on to work, well, then you need to really set that slider. Otherwise, your add-on ain't going to work properly, you know? General aviation traffic, yeah, I ain't that bothered about seeing Cessnas flying around. You know, if I'm in a Cessna, that's great, but I don't need to see 100 others. So I've set that down to 5%. All of these are done for performance, really, because I sit here and I think to myself, the visual, what I'm seeing, does it outweigh the performance hits that I'm taking or the performance benefit that I'm going to get? And for me, seeing general aviation aircraft flying around in the sim isn't the be all and end all. So I would rather lower that setting and have a higher airline traffic density, because let's face it, I mean, I personally would rather see a big 747 at an airport over a Cessna. So lowering one enables me to raise another. I mean, that's not strictly the true, but it's like, if I have my aviation traffic density turned low, I have all these low, then that frees up resources, meaning I can have a higher traffic density at airports. So that's the way I see it. Realism. Again, I haven't really touched these much. Turn up all these to max, basically, because I want it realistic. I haven't enabled gyro drift on here. So maybe I should really, because it says here that it enables your compass to drift from the magnetic heading, which I'm assuming is real, so maybe I should take that. I ignore crashes and damage, only because if you're flying online and you accidentally whatever, then it's a bit of a pain to restart everything. And I've taken off detect crashes and damage, mainly because, you know, mainly because I'm doing videos. That's basically it. If I wasn't doing videos, then detect them, because that's more realistic. I don't want auto mixture or unlimited fuel, so I untick that. I think I think Vsync require you to untick it anyway. Engine stress damages engine. Well, yes, I do want, you know, if I'm stressing the engine, I do want it to be damaged. Put these on just because it looks cool and it sort of is realistic. Don't want to use auto rudder, and that's it really. Ignore weight. Select to ignore the effect of the attachment's weight on the vehicle. You know, I've never unticked. I've never played with these, so I don't really know what they do, to be honest. So I'm not going to pretend I do. Calibration. I mean, these controls down here, they're pretty obvious. I have my sensitivity whacked up to high and my null down to 0 for every device that I have here. I thought my rudder pedals weren't in them, but it's in the middle of the two quadrants. Yeah, I have everything like sensitivity high, null zone down to 0, and I find that actually works better and feels realistic as well. But do tests for yourselves, I guess. I mean, if there's any questions on these, I don't know what I can really say about these, because this is what you need to set for these things to work. One thing I do find is these have to be ticked, otherwise your brakes are constantly on, and that can be annoying. Sometimes these may even flip around, like if I go into flight quadrant, this should be my throttle. If I scroll down, yes, these are my throttles, and then this should be my mixture and my propeller. But sometimes when I come down here, yes, it is. Sometimes when I come down here, this will also be throttle and throttle reverser, and it's like, it's all playing up a little bit. But it's only a case of coming in and quickly, you know, ticking things and doing it again. I do have everything saved. I've exported things as a profile, so I can just quickly import them if things are playing up. Key assignments, I mean, I've configured these. I've taken off all the num locks because I use my num locks, my keypad, for my camera system chase plane. So I've deleted all them off, and I've reset like snapshot in here. I think snapshot is V, and I've reset it to C. Now, one thing I came across last night, capture video. The default capture video is like DVD quality, which is fine, I guess. You know, and if you click the assignment, it will start recording for you, and it doesn't really take a hit on your frame rates. I think I noticed like a 3 frames per second drop when I was recording, and it does a good job, but the quality is very poor. I've raised mine up to HD, and I've yet to see what it does. I record all my videos using OBS, so I've never tested this in HD, which I suppose I can do, but it makes no difference to me. Although I do use the capture screenshot because that like literally captures a screenshot in full resolution, so I get 4K images come off. So I do use that while I'm flying around. Weather. Now, 60 miles, again, this is set in active sky the same. If you set it in active sky, it overrides this one, okay? So whatever it says in active sky is what it's going to say in your sim. 60 miles cloud draw distance. I don't know who can see beyond, you know, like 70 miles, 80 miles. You know, I don't even think the Earth's curvature allows for that kind of distance. So, you know, put it like this. The higher you put this slider up, right, the more performance it's going to hit because it's drawing it out even further, okay? If you are flying and you've got mountains in the background, or if you're flying, you know, and you're at a certain altitude, you're not really going to see beyond, you know, a certain mileage, you know. So why waste your computer's power? I have mine on 60, and that saves performance. And that enables me, or it doesn't enable me, but it means that I can have all this completely maxed out. Because yeah, I want to see clouds everywhere. I want to see them realistically. So that's why I also click detailed clouds. I don't want thermal visualization. I don't really, you know, that's not realistic. You don't see thermals in real life. You feel them. So, and you know where they are. So I don't tick that either. All these I tick because, yeah, windshield effects, that's realistic in real life, yeah. You know, participation detailed, well, yeah, I want everything detailed, you know. And I think this one, I've been told to by Active Sky to have that. I'm not sure. But there you go. Lighting now. HDR lighting, okay. I use Tomato Shade, just the preset. I don't use the application itself. I use the preset in PTA. And its settings of what it's told me to sort of have mine at. I think this one actually is, should be at 85, the saturation. But this is basically what it's told me to use. So I've used it, you know. Dynamic reflections, the more dynamic reflections you have on, okay, the more of an impact it will have on your frames. For me, dynamic reflections, you know, it's not the be all and end all, really. You know, reflections to me aren't everything, but medium and everything still does look really good, okay? I'm not here to make like cinematic, beautiful looking videos, because if I was, maybe I would ramp this up to ultra and go mental on it, but I don't, so there's no point. Display lens flare, that's not realistic whatsoever, okay? Cameras get lens flare, okay, because of the way the lenses are made. We, in our eyes, do not get lens flare. So why would I see lens flare, you know, unless I'm looking through a camera? So I untick that, and that actually affects performance. these do affect performance as well. But I do want to have my dynamic lighting on. I want to see that, and I do want to see the landing lights illuminate onto the ground because it's realistic, and that's really what I'm choosing here. Now, I've set my shadow quality, okay, according to, I guess I've got an old school mentality here. You know, if I had this maxed out, you know, on ultra, it's like ultra seems insane to me. You know, it's like I'm interested in high quality. I'm not really that bothered about ultra quality in shadows. I mean, shadows are shadows, you know. It's like shadows aren't the make it or break it. You do notice when they're not there, but you don't need to have like the quality of the shadow like in 4K definition or something. And you know, these do take a performance hit, I've noticed. So doing tests, it's like, okay, I'll have high quality and I'm happy with that. Like the shadows that I see in my sim, I'm not unhappy about whatsoever. You know, I'm absolutely happy about that. So to save performance, you know, because I basically think what's important to me in seeing in the sim, you know, is it important to see the smallest little detail at 40,000 feet, or is it important to have a smooth performance? And for me, performance is everything. You know, performance should be your first initial, and then it should be what the visuals look like. So a lot of these settings are done for performance, for what my hardware can manage. And you know, I've got good hardware, so that enables me then to have higher settings. Casting and receiving of shadows, you know, at the end of the day, inside the cockpit, outside the cockpit, on the planes, that's fine. Like trees casting a shadow, you know, how much really are you gonna see that? Buildings casting a shadow, now that one, right, does make a difference in terms of its visuals, you know. But if you fly at a certain time, it's kind of a cheat in that you don't see the shadow cast at certain times of the day. So therefore, it's like you can have this unticked if you fly at this certain time of day, and you'll still see the same thing, you know, because the shadow wouldn't be casting anyway at this certain time. And I'm talking about like just after sunrise and just after sunset. It's like that golden hour that filmmakers talk about. You know, you don't see, they don't cast shadows anyway. So, you know, you could untick this and fly at them times, and you've saved performance. Because if you ticked it, it would enable it, and you'd have a slower performance. So I don't have that ticked, but I do want it to receive shadows on, like if I'm flying over, you know, or if I see, you know, clouds, I do want them to bounce off it. So that's why I also tick clouds and terrain. You know, particles, shadowing, that's going crazy now, that is, you know. Yeah, so a lot of these I don't want, I'm not that bothered about, you know, like simulation objects. So simulation objects, that's all your vehicles basically, okay, even your airplanes. Like, although I have external vehicle checked, so you know I'm fine, but like a car traveling around the airport, I'm not bothered if that's receiving and casting shadows or not. You know, I'm not here to see that, you know, so I'm not bothered about it. So save on your performance, untick them. World, so here we go, here's the nitty gritty. First and foremost, untick dynamic 3D autogen vegetation. I think Orbex recommend that, not Orbex, the trees, Terraflor trees recommend that. That is a massive performance hit, that is. You'll see a big difference in your performance if you untick that. It ain't a big thing either, to be honest. It's nothing major. Oh, hello. Autogen draw distance low. What's that all about? Put that back up to high. Enable bathymetry, right? Okay, so unless you're flying, or rather not flying, but unless you're going in a submarine, which they do have in the sim, submarines and underwater, right? It's like you don't need to enable this because that's going to take up time to load in, and it's going to take a performance hit when it's loaded into the sim. Now, the performance hit isn't that great, to be honest. It isn't major, but you do not see any of its effects when you're flying in the skies. You do not see it at all. And I think it also can cause havoc with certain textures as well, if your ocean textures. So I untick it and I save a little performance. Reflections, again, you know, I'm not that too bothered about reflections of things, you know, so I just tick what's important to me, what I want to see. Like, yeah, I want to see clouds reflected onto the ground, onto the terrain. I ain't bothered about these kind of reflections here, to be honest. So untick them, and plus sometimes the what you call it, the add-on might even have like reflection glass built in anyway, so it's like you don't need to have it ticked. Water detail high. I mean, for me, it doesn't need to be set to mental, which is like the ultra setting, you know. It doesn't need to be set ultra. I like high quality stuff, so high quality. If you go on the P3D website, it tells you what each of these sliders do. Like if you have it set to low, what you're gonna see, okay, in the water detail, okay. Now when you set it to high, you see the reflections of the sun, and to me that's really what I want to see in the water. I want to see the sun reflecting off the water and see that glisten, and that's what you get with high. I can't remember what you get with ultra, what's like special effect it is, but it ain't important enough to lose frame rates over. So again, same with special effects here. It tells you on the P3D website what each of these sliders represents for what you see. Now fireworks, I think, is high or medium, and again, I can't remember what it is. So if you select high or medium or low, you're gonna see these certain special effects. Special effects aren't that great to me. Again, I'm not making videos, so you know, for visual beautification. So save on my frame rates medium, because I'm not that bothered about special effects. I'm more bothered about the plane and the scenery. So scenery, this now, everybody has what they swear by are different settings, okay? Everybody swears by you've got to have it on whatever setting, and you know, if you have them all maxed out, you're going to lose performance. Okay, here we go, guys. I've done tests, okay? I've done tests where I've turned all of these off. I've done tests where they've all been on normal, they've all been on medium. I've done tests where they've all been maxed out. Now, the only one that I have noticed that really plays havoc with my frames is the auto-gen draw distance, okay? Everything else I max out for two reasons. One, some add-ons require the slider complexity to be set to, I think it's either dense or very dense, in order for you to see everything. So max it out. If your hardware supports it, max it out, okay? I have found that I get smoother frame performance when everything is maxed out. Not the auto-gen draw distance, but everything else in the scenery objects, okay? The way the second reason as well, the way I sort of have it in my mind is that I want to see the full scenery complexity, I want to see the full density of the auto-gen, and I want to see all the buildings, okay? Because that is a full simulator experience, okay? I can control how much of that I see, okay, by this one slider alone, okay? Yes, I could minimize these, right? Now, suddenly, the scenery ain't gonna be that complex. The auto-gen vegetation isn't gonna be everywhere. The auto-gen buildings aren't gonna be everywhere. But if I had this maxed up to full, okay, so what we're gonna see here is very little buildings and vegetation everywhere. What? Hey, what? Like, you're gonna see hardly anything everywhere. That doesn't make sense to me. But if we max these out to high, and this was down to high originally, but I have it on medium if I fly in at Heathrow. If I play with these two settings, right, I'm gonna see all the buildings, all the vegetation in a complex way, but I can set how much of it I see. I can set, do I see it go out 5 miles, 10 miles? Do I see it go out 30 miles? Do I see it go out 50 miles? You know, each one of these sliders does represent a certain mileage of coverage for your vegetation, your building, and how complex your scenery will be. Surely you want to have your scenery complexity maxed out. You want to see it in as detailed a way as possible. If you've got Orbex and you've got everything of, or like Orbex Global, Orbex Vector, Orbex Land Class, and Regions, you've got what they call the full burger, as they called it at Cosford. Then yeah, sure, you want to have all this maxed out, okay? But you don't have to see everything. You can limit how much of it you do see, and that I've had better frame performance when I've had everything maxed out and I just change this one slider. If I was to limit things like this, right, I don't know if this is true, but I feel like I'm asking the simulator to cap things, okay? I'm asking it to cap how many buildings I'll see, how much vegetation I'll see. If you haven't got a computer like that is like very good in performance, then yes, you may want to limit these, because it will depend on how much hardware you've got, or how good or much hardware you've got, to what sliders you can set at. Then by all means set it to dense. I mean, if you think about it, so you got very sparse, none, and what's the other one? None. So we got none, and very sparse. So taking auto-gen building density, the next one up is sparse. Then you've got normal. I suppose even having it on normal, right, is fine, because it's normal. You know, if you had them on normal, you would see things fine. You could then perhaps have that a little bit higher, so you would see everything normally. You know, I mean, you could even have maybe that set on medium. I don't know. On my machine, on my setup, I have found that if that is set to high or medium, and everything's maxed out, I get a smoother frame performance. And it's, so for me, it performs better than if I cap it all. Okay, I'm sorry if I'm rambling on this. A lot of people have got different theories on this. I've done a lot of tests, and that's what I found. Terrain, again, I have found that everything maxed out works better than having it restricted down. So we'll go through each of these now. One thing to say, if you've got a HD monitor, tick high resolution terrain textures, because if you don't tick that, you're gonna go, this looks crap, this looks pants, this looks, why isn't my textures loading in properly? Yeah, tick that and suddenly you'll get like 4K HD textures loading into your sim, and you'll go, oh yeah. Okay, so make sure that's ticked. Level of detail radius. So this pertains to your airplane, okay? How much level of detail around your airplane are you going to see? I set it to max, and we're talking about the terrain, by the way, the landscape. How much landscape level of detail around your aircraft are you going to see? I max it out because I want to see the terrain in the best way possible, okay? It does say higher settings may decrease performance. Well, that's true. If I had it set to low, you know, as opposed to max, you know, then I suppose it could do. But I don't know. If a scenery is built a certain way and you're asking it to lower itself, surely you're asking the computer to perform complex calculations in order to lower that level of detail. I don't know. Anyway, I have all these maxed out, okay? Tessellation factor ultra, okay? So I'm not too sure what that means, to be honest, the tessellation factor. But I have it maxed out. I have done tests on these and sort of different ones, and for me this works better. I use FS Global Next Generation, or FS Global Ultimate Next Generation, and their mesh comes in at 1 meter per pixel, okay? Orbex's mesh, because they do have mesh, comes in at 10 meters per pixel, okay? Other sceneries may come in at 5. I use FS Global, it comes in at 1. So if I was to use, and I think the default for the sim is 76, you know, which, you know, is rubbish, you know. If I was to use just Orbex products, then having that set to 10 makes sense. And therefore, I'd be asking the computer to not really do anything to the mesh. If I use just Orbex resolution and I set it to 1 meter or lower than 10, I'm now asking my computer to perform extra calculations in order to scale the mesh to my desired height or my desired resolution from what it is originally. Okay, so I use FS Global and their mesh goes like up to 1 meter. So I want to see everything as is. I don't want the computer to mess with the resolution. So I have it set to 1 meter. So if you don't use FS Global Ultimate and you use just Orbex mesh or the base mesh that came with the simulator, set this slider according to what you use. Don't set it to, oh, if I have it maxed out or if I have it down here, set it to what you use. So if you only use P3D's default mesh, you haven't installed any mesh, then set it to 76 meters. If you've installed mesh and it says in its description that we use 10 meter mesh, then set it to 10 meters. Some of them say 5 and 2, set it to 5. I think majority is 5 and 10, you know, but set this according to what the add-on has told you, okay? So I use FS Global Ultimate, I set it to 1. Same with the texture resolution, really. I think P3 default is 10 meters. I'm not too sure about that. I know some of Orbex products are between 1 and 5 meter. What's it called? Mega Scenery have textures down to 60 centimeters, but their high res stuff, or some airports, go down to 7 centimeters. So that's why I have it selected to that. Again, select this to according to what your add-on. If you don't have an airport that has 7 centimeter texture resolution, then don't set it to that. Set it to what you have got it. I think most of it will be 15, 30, 60. I think most of them will be that, your airports. And your airports are probably going to be the ones that are most detailed. If you fly just Mega Scenery only, and you don't have really that many airports installed, then 60 centimeters, or 1 meter. So set these two settings according to your add-ons. That's why I have mine maxed out, because I have really good add-ons. If I was to lower these against what my add-ons say, then I am asking the computer to do extra calculations that are going to take away from performance. Okay? So, moving on, display. Now, this is where a lot of people have a lot of different settings, okay? I've saved these. These are the settings I use, and I haven't really changed them at all. These work best with my hardware, okay? So as you can see, I have a 4K TV. So therefore, I've ticked the 4K. I've even done in-flight videos where I've changed the resolution of this, and it's actually, I can see the difference. I can visually see the difference between 4K using a 2K texture and using a HD texture. Now, here is a little controversy. Everybody likes a little controversy. 3 main resolutions. I mean, let's face it, who's got a standard definition TV? Like, who is using, well, let's see, where's standard definition? They don't even have standard definition on here. But the lowest resolution you can possibly use is 1024-768. Like, who is using that kind of TV with this current technology, okay? If that is you, if you're using a very low monitor resolution, like if you're not using a HD monitor, okay, then you need to go out. I'm sorry, I hate to say this, that you need to, but you need to go out and you need to buy a new TV, okay? Because if you're using standard monitors for this, you're not seeing the best, and you're asking your computer to do more work than it needs to, okay? Textures, okay, because textures really, the textures of your sim really correlate to this resolution that you set your monitor at, okay? So depending on what type of monitor you get, obviously the type of monitors we do get in today's world is 4K and HD, okay? So they're the two we're really going to concern ourselves with. HD, which is 1920 by 1080, against 4K, which is 4096 by 2160. Graphics cards, believe it or not, don't run at full 4K. They run at 3840 by 2160, okay? And then your monitor TV upscales the rest of it, okay? With the Ultra HD kicking it into 4K. Everything's 4K. But your textures that you'll get with a lot of add-ons actually come at this resolution, not at your graphic card's native resolution. And yes, all graphic cards come in this native resolution here, okay? So when you first install your graphics card, you'll notice it'll say native by this as well for your Windows PC. And this, because that is what graphics cards come in at. You have to actively set the next level up, okay? According to the monitor you run. A lot of textures like come in 4K in this flavor as well, okay? They also say you can use 2K textures, okay? Which, if you go down to here, 2K, look, it's here, high, 2048. That's 2K. If I have a HD monitor, look at that number, 1080, 2048. So hang on. If I'm not using a 4K monitor, I should set my textures to high because it'll be better performance? No, you shouldn't. You should set it to medium because it'll be better performance. Because, I mean, either way, you're actually getting worse performance, okay? Because you're asking the computer, if you were to set it to here, you're asking your computer to downgrade the resolution of your textures to match your current display, okay? So 2048, and you're asking it to downgrade it to 1080, okay? If you set it to 1024, again, I mean, it's not by much now, but you're still asking the computer to downgrade the resolution of your textures, or upgrade it in this case, to 1080. So, I mean, if it takes, I mean, this here is a little misleading. Where it says here, global texture detail, higher settings may decrease performance, that is bull. That's baloney, okay? Higher settings will improve your performance, and I'll explain why in a moment. What was I saying? Yeah, sorry. If you're asking your computer to upgrade or downgrade, you're still asking it to perform extra calculations, okay? So no matter which one you chose here, you're kind of screwed. I mean, I don't know who is choosing very low texture resolution or even low texture resolution, okay? If you got anybody, these two options shouldn't even be included in here, okay? If anybody's using that, then again, you need to go get a new monitor, and if your graphics card doesn't support these two, I don't even know what you're running it P3D on, okay? These two options should not be shown, so we're not even talking about them, okay? But if you've got a HD monitor and you use either one of these two options, or you use that option, you're asking your computer to perform extra calculations which are going to take away from your performance, okay? The best way to get performance out of this P3D version is to set your texture resolution to ultra, 4K textures, full 4K textures. Go buy a 4K TV, okay, and set your graphics card, you know, get a graphics card that supports 4K, and set that to 4K. Now, we're asking the computer to put the resolution, or we're asking the computer to put the textures into the sim as they are. And we're not asking it to, you know, downgrade or upgrade the resolution of these textures, which means it ain't performing any extra calculations now. It ain't performing additional processes in order to do what I'm asking it to do. So therefore, I'm getting better performance. Okay? Now, I know a lot of people, you saying, well, I can't afford a 4K TV. I can't afford a 4K graphics card. Well, save your money and go buy it. Okay? Because this is the best way to get performance out of the sim. If you're using any other resolution here, if you're using, for instance, I mean, some of these are really bizarre. Like you've got like, where is it? 2560 to 1440. Like what TV is that? Okay, what graphics card is that? Even if you put this resolution, even if you've got it on that resolution, right, and you've set this to ultra, okay, you're asking the sim, you're asking your PC, sorry, to take all your textures, and when I say textures, I mean your airplane textures, your cloud textures, your ground textures, your building textures, every single texture in the sim, which is everything you see, by the way, and there are hundreds of different textures, and you're asking it to scale it down from 4096 to 1440. Huh? So even if you chose this option here, you're still asking your PC to scale your textures down from 2048 to 1440. You might find that there is an increase in performance when you have it set from that as opposed to that. And even if you set it from that, you might see a slight increase in performance because the 1024 number and the 2048 number, I think 1024 is closer to 1440 than 2048 is. So therefore there's less calculations needed. Okay? Oh, this all just sounds like a headache, to be honest. It's like, set it to ultra, go buy a 4K TV, save your money, go buy a 4K TV, get a 4K graphics card installed, and set that to 4K. Now, your computer ain't doing jack in terms of textures. It's just putting them in as they are, okay? And it's having to work less, which means you're getting better frames. Ta-da! So that's enough for that. I'm not going on about that anymore. I've got 2 monitors, so that's why I got 2 displays. That's my 4K. That's my side monitor. So obviously I set it to 4K. Texture and image quality now. FXAA. Okay, so let's see what it says it does. Smooths edges of objects. Right, okay. Well, guess what? That's what this does as well. And if you have that off, this still works. So I don't know why you'd have that on, because that does decrease frame performance. So putting that on makes things look like, makes your computer run worse and does the same job as this one. This I have found, right, that the higher you go from none, if you set this to none, you're going to have very jaggedy and very pin sharp textures. Okay, everything in your sim is going to be very pin sharp and very jaggedy. And the more higher you go from this, from none all the way up to 8, you find things like blur off. They tend to look blurry, but which means it removes that jaggy performance, which means everything looks smoother. Okay, now if you've got a HD monitor, MSAA, and if you've got a 4K monitor, SSAA. Simple. I select 4 simply because I don't like things too blurry in my sim. Okay, I don't want it maxed out to 8. My computer could handle it, but it's like it's just too blurry. You know, it's like I need my glasses on, you know, to see it. It's like I do like a little bit of pin sharp like a bit of pin sharpness. So I don't max mine out. I set it to 4. And I don't know, I don't think it has anything to do with this, but I set it to 4 as well because everything else here is set to 4, so I might as well set that to 4. I don't think that has any effect on it though. Texture filtering, again, I've done tests and I found that double whatever your textures are set at. Okay, so if you've set your textures to 1024, then set that to 2. If you've set your textures to 2048, then set that to 8. And well, no, sorry. If it was 2048, then set it to 4. Sorry. And if you've set it to ultra, set it to 8. 16 does literally virtually nothing compared to 8. And again, it takes away from frames, so I've not noticed a single difference, so I just keep it at 8. And that's it. Oh yeah, Vsync. So okay, I use NVIDIA Inspector because I've got an NVIDIA graphics card, and I highly recommend getting and using a NVIDIA graphics card. Okay, it runs smoother with prepared than any other graphics card. Okay, like if you have a Radeon graphics card or whatever, AMD graphics card, whatever they are, okay, you can't use NVIDIA Inspector with them. Okay, it won't work, or it just doesn't work. So get an NVIDIA graphics card. I use a 1080 Ti GTX, as you can see here. This one, it's a 11 gig, I believe, version. Has enough memory in it, or you know, enough RAM, and it performs absolutely spectacular. Newer ones, yeah, there is a newer one, the 2070 just come out, and I was speaking with a developer at the Cosford Comic Con. What? The Cosford Flight Show. Sorry. Oh my god. And it basically said that you know, the 2070 doesn't come with as much RAM as the 1080. Okay, I think it's like 8 gig. So you're not being able to load as much onto the card, you know, as you can with the 1080. So performance versus price, you know, it's like $1,400 or something ridiculous, you know. So it's like it's like £1,000, you know, if you want to buy it. And it's like you only get a marginal slight visual improvement. Okay, yes, visually it looks better, but it can't handle as much, so therefore it's performing worse. So for me, this one is not only less expensive but performs better, so it's a no-brainer. Go for the 1080. And therefore, anyway, I use NVIDIA Inspector. Okay, so in my NVIDIA Inspector, I have set the refresh rate to half. Okay, and on my graphics card for my PC, I've set the refresh rate to 60. Okay, so my graphics card is 60 hertz. Okay, it's giving out the 60 hertz glory, as it were. Okay, and then I've asked the inspector to cut that in half for the monitor. Okay, so I mean, you're not going to see this now. If I click this, you probably won't see it, but it says 60p on my TV. Okay, so my TV is bringing it out in 60 hertz. I've asked the inspector though to take it down to 30 for the frame rate. Okay, so it's going to be cutting that 60 in half, and then I've asked the frame rate in my sim to be just above 30, so 32. Okay, which means I get very stable frames at like 29, 30, 32. It never goes beyond that window between 29 to 32. Okay, so pretty much 30 is what I get locked on, which means the rest of the computing power goes to loading textures, making sure everything's not blurry, you know, making sure everything's loading in the sim quick, you know, because it's easy to achieve a 30, you know, frame rate, which means the power of the PC is then being redirected. Now, if I had that set to 60 and I took off half refresh rate, I've got to make sure, in order to get a smooth flight, I've got to make sure that I can get 60 frames a second, like continually, which means a lot of these sliders would not be able to be on full. if I did that, because not many PCs can handle everything maxed out at 60 frames per second. P3D can handle it, like, yeah, it can do 120 frames or 125 frames on default. But when you start loading add-ons in and you start, you know, asking your computer to take all these add-ons on, and you start asking it to still generate at 60 frames a second, well, that's gonna sweat your graphics card, and probably burn it out quicker as well, to be honest. So for me, fluid motion begins at 25 frames a second. Like, our brains have been trained by the cinema that 25 frames a second is what we consider fluid motion, okay? Because that's what the films we used to be shot at, were 24 frames a second. Animation, 24 frames a second. It's only with the advent of like stuff like The Hobbit that things were filmed in 60 frames a second or 120 frames a second. And it, you know, it's like, it doesn't mean it's smoother, right? It means it's clearer, you know, but not smoother. You know, it might, you know, no one's playing Hobbit at 120 frames a second on the telly, okay? TVs are like 60 hertz, which means it's being played back at 60 frames a second to match the hertz rate. Because if it played it back at a lower rate, if it tried to play at 24 frames a second, there'd be screen tearing and all sorts. And vice versa, if you had a TV that could only manage 30 hertz and you asked it to perform 60 frames a second, it ain't going to be able to refresh quick enough, right? You would have to have that frame rate. Now I'm lucky where my TV will actually accommodate 24 hertz, 30 hertz, and 60 hertz. So I could pretty much set this as low as I want. I could set this to 24, still get a smooth performing flight, okay? And everything will be maxed out, because as soon as it hits that 24 frames per second, the rest of the computing power, if I use NVIDIA Inspector, goes on the scenery, goes on the world. And so everything's nice and super smooth. So a lot of people say to me, well, yeah, but you know, P3D can handle 60 frames a second. You should make it 60 frames a second because it's better quality. Well, actually, no. Quality to me is defined by performance, not by the visual look of something, okay? If you've got something that looks amazing, but it's stuttering like anything, well, that's not going to be a fun experience. That's not great sim, is it? That's not great performance, you know. But if you've got something that just looks okay and is super smooth, for me, that's much better. Now, that's why I target my sim to aim for 30 frames a second. It's still smooth. It's a frame rate that I know my PC can handle, and it means I can have everything looking fantastic. So I get the best of both worlds. I get a great looking sim at a smooth rate. That's why I have Vsync on, triple buffering, and I set that to 32. And then in NVIDIA Inspector, I set the refresh rate to half, because my monitor is on 60 hertz, and that's what I've synced to my graphics card, is 60 hertz as well. So there we go. I also take wide view aspect ratio because I prefer one thing as well. If you're using chase plane, by the way, the default is 1.0 zoom, okay? If you take wide, the camera seems to be pushing back, so you see more, okay? That is all, okay? The view doesn't suddenly expand, it just means the camera comes back a little bit, okay? You're still on zoom 1.0, but the camera position comes back, which means you do get a wider view. Now, one thing on performance here, the more view of the scenery you have in your camera view, so the more you come back, the less performance you'll get. So if I unticked this box, I'd get better performance, okay? I mean, I get 30 frames now, even with it ticked, so it makes no difference to me. But I zoom forward. I zoom, what do I zoom? I zoom a little bit forward. I use Mega Scenery, okay? And they recommend that you have your zoom set between 30 to 40 for the best visual performance with their scenery. Okay, so I have all my cameras set to 40. Okay, because that is the maximum level that Mega Scenery allows me to have, and I see their map textures in beautiful quality. Okay, and it's not like if I set it to 1, I'd probably get slightly better performance, because the lower number you go, if you set it to 0.25, you're going to be really zoomed back. Everything's going to look fish-eyed, because it's kind of almost like the millimeter of a camera. You know, a 16mm lens is wider than a 50mm lens. You know, as humans, our eyes are set to like 50mm. Okay, so we see the world in like 50mm. Yes, we have peripheral vision, right, that goes off beyond 50mm, but our main center focus is 50mm. So if you set your camera to 0.50, that's correct for what you see as a human. And then you can move your seat forward and backwards to compensate for your instruments, which is what I do. I kind of set my camera when I'm in an aircraft to make sure it's sitting on the seat of the captain, of what it looks like when I'd be in the cockpit. But anyway, maybe I should do a separate video for chase plane and all the zoom settings. I don't know. If you want one, let me know in the comments below. But yeah, I tick that for wide view, mainly because I use 0.40 in all my camera settings, and I use 0.40 because Mega Scenery requires it in order to see their textures in the best way. Okay, and that's why I guess my camera setting looks the way it does. That's purely the only reason. So, gosh, that was painful. Cancel out of that because I don't want to change anything. Finally, scenery. Now this is going to be very quick. I always get that warning. If I remove that fly tamper entry, I lose bits of scenery. It's because I've got more than one fly tamper entry in there. It doesn't affect anything. Again, a lot of people will tell you untick what you don't use. The only things I untick in here are things that I don't want to use. Like, I have everything ticked because I'll probably forget to untick it if I don't. So, like if I'm not flying in Hawaii, why do I need to have it all ticked up? When I used to untick all this, yes, it would load like that. But I'd get so many problems with my sim. It was always crashing. It was always doing this. Because every time you untick it or retick it, you should really go and run your elevation tool from Orbex, your vector tool, and then reload your shaders again. And if you don't, you're going to get problems. And you know what? That sounds like an awful lot of messing about. I just leave everything that I've got in my sim ticked, and I go and make a cup of tea while it's loading up. Like, yeah, see all these mega sceneries that I've got? Yeah, I'm not going to be flying in all them states at once. But you know what? If I started unticking that, and then I've got to go run a tool, and then I've got to reinstall my shaders, and then on the next flight I'm going to go somewhere else, so I've got to do that again, and it's just an awful lot of messing about. You know, I just want to get in and I just want to fly, and I don't care if it loads slow. I'll just go do something else while it's loading, and then once it's loaded, okay? The only thing I untick here is these things here, the mesh from Orbex, okay? I spoke to an Orbex developer at the Comic-Con, right? And he said that their mesh is about 10 meters per pixel, okay? I use FS Global, which is 1 meter, which is much better, right? Now, scenery order does matter. So if the mesh for Orbex is higher in the scenery library, then where's my here? No, here it is. Here's my mesh, okay, for the sim, okay. It's way down below, so any mesh that I've got up above will override this mesh. So if I want to see that mesh, I need to untick any type of mesh. Mega Scenery don't do mesh. Any type of mesh that comes up here. So here, whoa, mesh, get rid of it, you know, because it's going to override the mesh that I already have got. Actually, I'm gonna retick that because it says airport mesh, so I better keep that. But if any other mesh is here, I'll untick it because I want FS Global Ultimate mesh to come through. I don't want any other mesh to come through because it's going to be worse quality. It's going to be lower resolution. So I want to see the better mesh, you know? So just going through all these things here, I don't see the word mesh anywhere. I don't see any of these have mesh. So I think I'm okay. So I think the first thing, a bit of mesh is, oh, here we go, Holger mesh. I'll get rid of that. That's the Australia mesh. Actually, Holger mesh. I don't know. I'm gonna retake that because I'm not sure if Holger mesh is the same as the mesh. I think it might be. Anyway, I'll just leave it. But yeah, I untick anything that says mesh because I don't want this to override the global. Now, a lot of people will say, yeah, but it only uses the most high quality one you've got in your sim. Yeah, but I don't want it scanning. I don't want my computer having to scan every time to find the higher quality one. So I'll just disable it at the end of the day. I have not had any issues by disabling these meshes, okay? I'm not going to use them, so therefore why am I going to actually activate them? I'm never going to use them, so therefore, you know, I don't want Orbex's mesh. I've got better mesh in my sim already, so I just untick it. And it doesn't cause any problems whatsoever, okay? But the order of things, yes. So everything default hits at the bottom down here. Down here at world base here. Got some add-ons down here, but I can't move them. You know, the vector has placed these down here. But yeah, scenery base, that should be at your bottom. That's basically what came with default of the sim, as is all of these here. This is what came with default of the sim, as is these bits here. These came default of the sim, as is these scenery items here. This is default sim. Okay, so yeah, we don't want to see that really. So everything at the bottom that you don't want to see. This is the first bit of mesh we do want to see, so that's why it sits above that. But obviously it's got to sit below the vector stuff. Orbex arranges, I don't touch the arrangement of this, okay? Orbex does. I use the vector tool to decide where everything goes, and that vector tool does it correctly for me. You know, I don't have to sit here and go, right, well, I want to move this one down and up now in the order, because I just let vector do it, and it arranges everything the way it should be arranged for it to look fine in the sim, you know. So why would I mess with the order of this? Why do I need to worry about the order of this? Just get Orbex Vector and you'll get that free little elevation tool. You run the elevation tool, you apply what it says, you exit out, then you rerun your shaders, and that's it. You're okay. You're fine, you know. Absolutely a-okay. I'm just going to click OK because I did make a change. Again, that warning, I don't know why it comes up. But there we go. That's basically it. I hope I've answered a few questions. If there is something you're still unsure about, please put it in the comments below, and I will answer it straight away. Thanks for watching this. Sorry I've been going on. This is like an hour. My gosh, we need to get this down. Thanks for listening. I hope I've helped. I hope somewhere you've made sense of my ramblings. And I'll see you all in the next video. Take care, guys. Bye.